If you play Duelist and you want to get good at Valorant, pay attention. I'm skipping all of the fluff in this video. I just want to highlight what texture does well. And if that's what you want, then great. If your attention span is fried, this video can't help you anyways. So starting with his mechanics, I wanted to point out his use of Jett knives. Oftentimes when I use Jett knives or when I see other pros use Jett knives, they tend to go for headshots. For example, the player that has a really good headshot percentage with Jett knives is Demon1. But that's not the only way to get kills with Jett knives. You can go for 3 body shots and they do 50 damage each, which adds up to 150. And texture specifically seems to abuse this a lot. I don't think it's that texture doesn't have the capability to go for headshots, but I think he's more so prioritizing his movement. So for example, he loves to do this thing where he'll updraft and then just fall instead of floating and hit 3 body shots while he's dropping down. Or if there's an enemy really close to him, then he might just jump and then just insta drop and go for body shots. This could also be potentially related to his slightly higher sensitivity. He plays at 800 DPI, 0.45 in game, and as a result, he also buys the Phantom a ton. So I don't think it's that he has bad aim per se, but I think he's a little bit more comfortable just prioritizing speed and going for body shots and being mobile. Now, I'm not saying that he doesn't have insane aim and mechanics, because he does. Check out this 1v5 attempt. So another thing I want to quickly point out with his mechanics is that he is very good at holding angles and getting insta one taps. When I look at these kills, I'm like, oh my god, this guy's reaction time is so quick. Which might be true, I don't know his reaction time, but I would assume it's because he actually came from Overwatch. And in that game, characters move a lot quicker. And because of that, I think Valorant kind of looks like it's in slow motion to him. I'm not sure, but that's kind of my guess. If you've been in the aim training community or like the rabbit hole, you might understand this as movement reading. So to play Overwatch, you have to have really good movement reading because people's strafe patterns can change often, or they might use like a certain ability and then their movement pattern is predictable, but they're moving really quick, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is movement reading is a really important skill to actually be good at Overwatch. And I think that's translated over in Valorant because number 1, targets move slower, and number 2, the movement patterns are a lot simpler, so he can kind of just hold angles in one tap. Okay, last but not least with his mechanics is that texture is very good at his op. I think the thing that stands out the most to me with his op is that he's very quick with it. So this relates to how quick he shoots when he's holding an angle, when he quickscopes, and when he flicks. His flicks with the op are pretty iconic at this point, specifically with the Ascent B main one. Okay, so those are really the main things that kind of stood out for me with his mechanics. I want to highlight the idea that everyone's mechanics are slightly different, right? Texture doesn't play anything like Demon1, but he was still able to win in Shanghai. I really love the idea that one's aiming style and one's shooting style is unique to them, and that there are multiple ways to actually get kills in Valorant in terms of shooting style and aim. I'll likely make a video on this in the future, kind of highlighting different types of shooting styles and aim styles. But for now, let's move on from textures mechanics. I wanted to quickly mention if you're a Duelist player from Plat 3 to Diamond 3, I will be hosting a Duelist bootcamp on July 15th. More details in the Discord. So I wanted to break down Texture's playstyle as a Duelist really quickly. The overall theme of his playstyle is that he is balanced. I think he's very smart with his decisions, he's very calculated. This translates into his ranked games in particular. On defense, he likes to play a little bit slower, a little bit more passive. What I mean by this is on defense, he will rarely go for off-barrier fights. Instead, he will oftentimes play fast rotator towards the center of the map and then just, rotate based off of what he sees on the minimap. But I think that this is really important that he's not going for a brute force playstyle to win ranked. This was one of those realizations that I had for myself when I was playing Duelist, is that you don't have to brute force every single round. Because at some point, over-aggression is just blind confidence, and that can cause inting in a game. On the other end of that though, if you're playing too passive, you're not ever going for opening duels, then you won't have the impact you need to carry a game. And that balance is something that I think Texture does really well. He will know when to play fast rotate and he will know when to contest early space. Not only is this done on a round by round basis, but this is also done on a game by game basis. For example, on the Ascent game that I reviewed, he pretty much never contested A main or B main ever. Whereas on the Haven game, we did see him go for a few fights out of garage, and some rounds he was playing A long and A short. But the general theme that I see when I review pro players is that they don't really go for off-barrier fights too often, and they typically bias on the side of playing fast rotate. I want you to think about it like this. If you play an extremity going for an early pick, then you're kind of putting all your eggs on one basket, because if they hit the site that's opposite of you, you're going to be playing rotate and then you have to play retake. Whereas if you play in the center of the map and play fast rotate, you might not necessarily be holding down a site, but you will be able to rotate in and get those 1 or 2 kills that can influence the site hold. So instead of being like a 0 or 100 playstyle, It's more so of in the middle ground, maybe like a 40 to 60. And this type of play I think is really good for players that can read the minimap well and make plays based on what they see. Whereas players that try to go for the brute force approach tend to be like heavy aimers, and they might not understand when to rotate, so instead they just opt for the let me contest this space, and hopefully if I kill them, then I get high value, and you know, it's like a high risk, high reward type of thing. Okay, so how does his balanced playstyle look in attack? What I noticed is he doesn't really take that much solo risk. In other words, he likes to be with the team a bunch, and he'll be executing with the team and taking space with the team. And if the executes and the rushes are going well, then he will try to play like that. This was really common on the Ascent game that I saw. He would just try to be with the team and execute with the team. He wouldn't really like walk up and take his solo fights. He's playing like very proper Valorant, even though it is ranked. He's just, you know, taking A main space, holding A main space, and waiting for the exec. However, when the rushes don't work, like on the Haven game, he will opt to play a little bit more of like a lurk playstyle, or like looking for fights elsewhere on the map instead of playing rush. So on Haven, this meant that he would go towards C, look for a kill. If he didn't see anything, he might walk up. And occasionally he would just straight up brute force the fight on A long. I think this is important because he will transition his playstyle from being more team-oriented and more like correct Valorant into a more selfish play if necessary. And something that stood out in particular in the Haven match is because they didn't have a sentinel, he would oftentimes make the decision to pick up flank and let his team kind of play on site while he's watching flank. He is very good at reading the minimap in these situations and understands when to get back onto site to help his team, while also making sure his teammates are very secure on the flank. And he's really only able to make this decision to leave the site because he understands all of the factors that go into whether or not his teammates can hold the site space while he's gone. Some factors to quickly consider would be potential rotate timing, like are the enemies going to be rotating longer because they like did a fake, or like there's a gap? Is there util like holding the choke point so to buy time, like a smoke or like a molly? It's just really like all of the factors that add up to him making the decision of like, oh yeah, I think my teammates have the site secure. I'm gonna go check flank. I'm gonna go, you know, play over there, and then I'll come back based on what I see on the minimap. Okay, so we kind of covered texture on ranked to quickly summarize. He's more of a balanced duelist. He plays with the team, plays for the team. Doesn't really have that selfish brute force type of playstyle unless he needs to. But how does that really translate into pro play? Well, let me tell you, it's completely different. On defense in particular, he doesn't typically play fast rotate at all in pro play. On Icebox in particular, in the finals against Heretics, he was playing super aggressive when it was consistently looking for fights like every other round or every single round. He was a large reason on why Icebox was even as close as it was, because they only got 2 rounds on attack. I think the most impressive thing about his aggressive on defense though, is that it had a lot of different flavors. He would go for those off-barrier like brute force fights that we talked about, specifically when he was floating belt or maybe going for the top pipes fight. And other times he would go for re-aggresses later in the round, and this was often done with the combo of KO Flash and Gecko Flash. And as a note to this, I think teams in VCT that do well are the ones that can be aggressive and do it consistently. When I was VOD reviewing the finals for this video, I noticed when t3xture and gen.g specifically would play passive on any map, like Ascent, for example, they played a really passive defense, they would just get destroyed. Like Heretics would kind of just contact space and then explode, and you know, they were playing reactively the entire defense. But on the Icebox game in particular, t3xture was able to have high impact because he was playing aggressive, and on Lotus, he was consistently fighting for Rebel space, which was helping a lot with how they had reads on defense. Now you might be a little bit confused because in pro play, t3xture is taking a lot of aggressive fights and taking space, whereas in ranked, he's playing a little bit more passive and he's playing more fast rotate. And this is mainly because of the tempo of the matches are completely different. Think about it like this. Most VCT games are going to be slower, right? Attackers are going to be taking their time, they're going to be defaulting, getting out util, playing the whole map. And typically in ranked, most attack halves are very fast, like they try to start with rushes first, and there's not really that many effective defaults. And on top of that, being really aggressive requires some sort of team coordination normally, right? You have to have some type of initiator util, you might have a teammate break util for you, and that level of coordination is obviously a lot harder to pull off in ranked, so it's not as common for your duelist to be contesting early space like that. Now, of course, some games you will have to contest space, which means that you have to ask your teammates for util. You have to understand what angle you want to fight and how you actually want to fight that space. And I think this is where the depth of being a duelist player comes in, and finding that balance of being too aggressive and too passive. Okay, so that kind of concludes the main things that I had to talk about with t3xture. He's obviously a very insane player and he's very invested into the game. I love watching his reactions when he dies. He's just like so emotional, or you know, whenever he has like a crazy hype play. On the Lotus game in particular, he had like a C's plus nade combo where he got a 4K and he was just so happy after. t3xture is a great player and a great personality, and after reviewing him, I'm definitely a fan. And if you guys are a fan of my content, check out my last video that I did on crosshair placement to help you guys with your mechanics.